Something unique is occurring in Europe's mountains and forests. After being hunted down almost to extinction nearly everywhere, brown bears are now making a comeback. They have been reintroduced in Trentino in northern Italy, as well as in the Pyrenees. Rewilding is the name of the European Union environmental project. Scientists work hand in hand with governmental agencies. It's a race against time because biodiversity is being lost worldwide.
Do we want to think only about what's good for us, or do we want to allow other life forms to thrive in our surroundings and give them a chance?
Bears are recolonizing Europe, and I think it's now our turn to learn to live with them.
Coexistence doesn't happen immediately. You cannot throw bears there and accept people to, okay, now everything's great.
Bears and humans are not natural friends, but can they live as neighbors again? In 1992, the European Union passed the Habitats Directive with the goal of promoting biodiversity and slowing the loss of natural habitats. Since then, the same environmental law has been applied to all member states. Large animals should be protected from extinction. The emblematic megafauna, this includes bears, who are hardly able to find any large areas that offer them an ideal habitat. Since the outset of the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago, humankind has been living in the Anthropocene epoch. That means that man now has the most significant impact on all aspects of our planetary environment. But humankind's conflict with bears and other predators dates back thousands of years, since people started tilling fields and domesticating animals.
Cette question du conflit avec les grands carnivores, elle est ancienne. On peut probablement.
The conflict between humans and predators is a very old story, probably dating back to the Neolithic transitional period, about 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, when new groups of people migrated to Europe from Eastern Europe and Central Asia. They brought their domesticated animals with them. As our societies evolved, conflicts have crystallized over the course of the centuries that led to the destruction of the large predator species.
But now bears are thriving in 10 different populations, spanning 22 European countries, a total of about 17,000 individual animals. There are 2 genetically distinct families, one in the east and one in the west. And it has been that way for 850,000 years. About 52 to 63 bears live in Trentino, in northern Italy. The first were resettled here about 20 years ago. The same time, they were also reintroduced in the Pyrenees, where about 40 bears live. In France, the resettlement program has been very controversial. In October 2018, 2 bears were flown in from Slovenia. Opponents blocked access roads. It was an unusual time for resettlement, shortly before the hibernation season. The idea was to avoid conflict with animal breeders whose sheep were no longer out on the summer pastures. Thus, the risk of bears immediately attacking domesticated animals was reduced. And just 3 weeks later, the first video footage of one of the 2 bears was made. In France, the governmental biodiversity agency is responsible for the resettlement efforts, as well as the protection and scientific observation of the bears.
We collect these hairs for genetic examinations that enable us to determine which bear has been rubbing its fur on this tree. This is a normal behavior for the bears and a way they communicate with one another.
The return of the bears is putting human tolerance to the test. Are we willing to make room for Europe's largest predator, even if the animal's needs are in direct competition with our own economic fundamentals? Aromatic substances are used to attract the bears so they can be more easily observed, allowing scientists to gather data about the population's development. Bears from Slovenia were first resettled here in 1996. The indigenous population had decreased to just a few individuals. The last indigenous bear in the Pyrenees was killed by a hunter in 2004.
When choosing bears to be released in France, various criteria are taken into consideration. The first is their genetic relationship to the Pyrenean bears. We have to know which population is most similar and which has a comparable habitat. The Slovenian population has a genetic diversity similar to the Pyrenean bears. In terms of habitat, the topography is not exactly identical, but the climate, vegetation, and food offerings are nearly the same as in the Pyrenees.
The Agency for Biodiversity, OFB, relies on maximum restraint in the scientific monitoring of reintroduction. Surveillance cameras are the most reliable way to observe the bears. Can bears return to the Pyrenees even though they are a threat to domestic herds? What will it take for people to accept their presence here again? Slovenia provides a role model. 60% of the country is covered with forest. The bears that live here belong to the Dinaric Pindos population, which extends from the north of Greece across the entire Balkans to Slovenia. At the beginning of the 20th century, bears were nearly exterminated here, with only 30 or 40 animals surviving. In 1931, they were put under protection, and a success story began. The population recovered. By 1998, there were 400 bears again, and today there are almost 1,000. All of the bears resettled in France since 1996 were originally from Slovenia. In the autumn of 2018, a team from the French Biodiversity Agency went there on a mission. The Slovenia Forest Service selected 2 female animals. Then French veterinarians examined them for disease and conducted a genetic test. One of the female bears was pregnant with 2 cubs. The transport to France took 1.5 days. The bears remained conscious, but were sedated. High Tatra National Park in Poland, located near the Slovenian border. With 3 million visitors annually, it is the most visited national park in the country and home to an estimated 55 to 150 Polish brown bears. A team of scientists from the University of Krakow are focused on the ecological role the brown bears play. What impact do they have on the ecosystem? These large animals are among the few wild plant-eating megafauna in Europe. They have a decisive influence on vegetation density and landscape structure.
Brown bears are potentially very important seed dispersers because they are megafauna. We have very few megafauna in Europe currently, and they are able to eat really huge amounts of fruits during the autumn when they are accumulating or preparing for the winter. And there are some plants what we think that is extremely connected with the brown bears.
Late September is when the bears find their favorite food, blueberries. For days, they eat whole mountain slopes bare. Not only the bears benefit from this, but also the blueberries, a perfect symbiosis.
The plant may need the brown bears to grow in new places and to disperse. They germinate much better after being eaten by bear. Then the bear deposits the scat in good places, and then the plant can germinate better and in new areas.
This dissemination has also been observed in other parts of the world. In Alaska, bears catch salmon and carry them into the forest to eat them. So the bears help provide 80% of the nitrogen fertilizer the trees need. Using a metal detector, the scientists search for the markings on a plot of land that they staked out a few weeks ago. Numerous blueberry seedlings have sprouted from the bears' droppings. Along with birds, they help disseminate the seeds of the plant.
For the bear, it's also very positive because it seems that they can get a lot of sugar and a lot of help to spend the winter. They get in better state the more bilberries they eat. And also it seems that the females is type of related with reproduction.
Bears are an umbrella species. Because they require a large habitat, they serve as a protective umbrella for many other, less demanding species.
Brown bears are also very important as scavengers, particularly in early spring when they wake up from wintering and there is a high ungulate mortality due to predation of wolf or to natural causes. Then they are eating these dead animals, so they are cleaning the forest of potentially disease and dead animals, basically. So this is a very important function.
Bears need a lot of space, on average 350 square kilometers. Male bears travel 8 to 10 kilometers a day. This enables them to find females from another gene pool. The female leaves her scent on a tree in early May. It doesn't take long for a male to pick up her scent. It's mating time. The first date. The dark brown male is patient, but the pair is being distracted by something. A bigger, older bear comes panting toward the couple. The younger male decides to retreat. Defending his new conquest would be too dangerous. His opponent thinks he has it easy. He courts the female by demonstrating dominant behavior. But she doesn't seem interested in continuing the ritual. The older bear withdraws. A cautious look. The coast is clear. The only time bears spend a few weeks together is during the mating season. Then, the males desert the females, who give birth to their young at the end of the winter season, and care for them alone for 2 to 2.5 years. In the French Pyrenees, the reintroduction of brown bears has led to a bitter fight with animal breeders. Sheep are being killed regularly. If it can be proven that they were killed by bears, the government pays compensation. In these cases, the Agency for Biodiversity must collect evidence and prove the cause of death.
Alors là, on va essayer de regarder.
First, we examine the hide from the inside and outside to see if there is blood on it. I'll check whether there are any bite marks where there's blood. If so, small hematomas form around the bite marks, which are caused by the force with which the teeth pierce the coat. If we have this indication on the fur, we can say that this animal was killed by a predator. This means that it was alive and that it was bitten and eaten from behind.
The
number of sheep killed in the Pyrenees has been increasing rapidly over the past several years. The conflict with animal breeders is worsening. Bears near the summer meadows pose a lethal threat to sheep. Sheep farmer Jean-Pierre Mérouz lost 265 sheep in June 2019. The animals probably panicked due to a bear attack and fell down a steep slope. He and many other breeders in the high mountains consider state-financed protective measures, such as electric fences for the night, guard dogs, and additional shepherds, to be ineffective.
Just look at the landscape we're dealing with. Look at the nature of that terrain over there. It is steep, and the sheep that graze there can only do so in small groups. We also have to move very carefully there. Otherwise, they might get frightened and fall off. How are we going to protect the sheep from predators in geographical conditions like this?
Large herds and difficult terrain make it hard for breeders to protect their animals.
Where are we going to put enclosures here? How can guard dogs, the patous, operate here? Because these measures could backfire. The sheepdog wants to protect the sheep. They're like children to him. But accidentally, when he tries to corner the predator and scare it away, he could cause a fall.
The conflict between the protectors of the bears and their opponents has intensified. In September 2019, 127 sheep died in the Central Pyrenees. A bear probably attacked the herd and caused the animals to fall to their death. In the department of Ariège alone, more than 1,200 sheep met a similar fate in the year 2019. That's more than twice the total in 2018. Local mayors at a protest in Toulouse.
Get rid of the bears from the Pyrenees so we can get back to farming our pastures like we always have.
Animal farmer Jean-Pierre Mirouz is also present at the demonstration. He is the mayor of his small community. In response, the French government took new measures.
The ministry's order of June provides that an authorized person may frighten the animal in order to protect the herd. First of all, the shepherd may use sound devices and lamps. If that does not help, firearms with non-lethal ammunition. These are hard rubber and detonation cartridges. When fired, there is a bang, the cartridge whistles and then explodes in midair. This is to scare the animal and drive it away.
François Saurazon's specialty is the reintroduction of wild animals. Considering the massive worldwide extinction of species, he says it's time to rethink things.
The way our society perceives nature is changing in profound ways. The presence of predators has caused conflicts, especially with regard to animal breeding, and confronted us with the question of how we, as humans, want to position ourselves within the overall context of biodiversity. Above all, in our relationship with animals, with all the positive aspects, but also with the problems they can pose for our development and well-being.
Romania, especially the Carpathians and Transylvania, is home to the largest bear population in Central Europe, estimated at between 6,000 and 7,000 animals. Government agencies and hunting associations put the number significantly higher. Scientists have voiced criticism, saying the large size of the local population and reports of incidents with so-called problem bears only serve to justify higher shooting rates. At present, the quota is 140 head. This applies to problem bears. However, there are no clear instructions from the government about which animals this should apply to. Hunting tourism, especially with hunters from Western Europe, is a lucrative business. Unlike in the Pyrenees, animal herds in the Carpathians are not kept on high mountains, so it's easier to herd them together. The herds are smaller, with 200 to 300 animals protected by guard dogs. The Carpathian is a native breed of dog that is particularly suitable for the protection of sheep. The family of sheep farmer Costel Chirila spends the summer here in the mountains with their animals. As a young man, he was attacked by a bear and suffered serious injuries. Still, he considers it normal to coexist with predators. To protect the sheep, his son, who tends to them, even sleeps right next to the enclosure, where they are housed at night.
We have a lot of experience with predators. And since we want to continue our lifestyle and stay here with our animals, all we can do is take a step back and learn to live together with the bears. This is quite normal. If we live as enemies, at some point there will be victims. Then it is either us or the predators.
The sheep are also protected by an electric fence, provided by a Romanian environmental protection organization. The close cooperation with the animal breeders is important, especially their acceptance that predators are a part of their lives. It's the only way biologist Silviu Șiriac can effectively implement protective measures.
Because we can only cover small areas, we have created pilot projects in the villages where the shepherds have problems with predators. We have selected a farmer in the project area where there are frequent attacks by predators. We erect electric fences and provide the shepherds with guard dogs. This encourages others to use traditional methods to reduce damage. Other shepherds can then observe what happens to the farmers who use effective protection methods.
What other measures are effective to help animal farmers coexist with predators? With funds from the European Union, traditional guard dog breeds are raised here.
Wolves and bears have always caused damage in the Carpathians. We want to persuade the shepherds to use other breeds of dogs. In Romania, there is a breed that has adapted very well to the conditions here, the Carpathian dog. He has been living here for thousands of years, has got used to the climate, and has a balanced temperament. This helps the shepherds also to reduce damage caused by wolves. We try to breed as many puppies as we can, then give them to the farmers free of charge so they can continue keeping their herds in the Carpathians.
In addition, the sheep farmers promise to pass on puppies to others in their area, free of charge. The aim is to build up a network of guard dogs. It's not just a myth. Bears really do love to eat honey. Unprotected apiaries are easy prey for them. Images from a surveillance camera in Abruzzo, Italy, show the damage bears can cause while searching for honey. The bear is not even disturbed by the startled and stinging bees. In Slovenia, with nearly 1,000 bears, there are tried and proven protection methods. This traditional apiary stands on a high pedestal that prevents bears from reaching the beehives. And here, a few kilometers away, is the modern version. This beekeeper protects his bee house with an electric fence. Not everyone has such a modern bee house. But electric fences have proven to be an effective way to protect the bees. Some people also simply put their beehives on iron bars that are too high and too smooth for bears.
I've been fencing off this apiary here since the beginning. Only then did I bring the bees here. This is because a bear on a hill in Loški Potok had knocked over my beehive, even though my dog was only 5 meters away from it.
This beekeeper considers living together with bears a normality. He maintains his electric fence and regularly checks that the voltage is at least 6,000 to 8,000 volts. Even such a simple electric fence provides effective protection.
A bear is no problem if the bee house is fenced in the way it should be. I have only had good experiences with bears, not bad ones.
The lawn must be carefully mowed. Nothing should touch the fence. Otherwise, the current would be diverted and the voltage would be too low. Slovenia allows the shooting of so-called problem bears.
If there are problem individuals, those should be removed, and at the same time the measures need to be undertaken that those causes why these bears became trouble bears should be removed, and this is availability of food.
In principle, EU law places bears under protection. There are exceptions in Slovakia, Romania, and Slovenia, among others. In 2019, a shooting quota of 160 animals was applied in Slovenia in an effort to reduce the population from 1,000 to 800 in 3 years.
Generally, the tolerance towards bears is quite high. People like the idea that they are living in the well-preserved nature with the bears, but they don't want to increase the number of bears in that area. They believe it's enough. And we believe the opinion of the local people is really important, because in long term the bears will survive in our area just if the people will tolerate them and will be able to coexist with them.
Hair and feces samples from bears are undergoing genetic analysis at the University of Ljubljana, making it possible to specifically identify individual animals. Mathematical models can then be used to calculate the size of the population.
We want to establish the identity of that bear, so we do a genotype out of a sample. So we extract the DNA, we pull the genetic material out of the sample, purify it so it's clear, and then we look at genetic markers, so specific short fragments of DNA that can help us identify the animal. The genotype we produce is unique, sort of like a genetic fingerprint. Whenever again we find a sample of the same animal, we can follow that bear through space and time.
Knowledge of the population structure is the basis for the annual determination of the hunting quota, because under no circumstances should the population be endangered.
One of the things we're doing is that we're reconstructing the pedigrees of the animals. We need to understand what removal of a certain animal of a certain category would mean for the population, because of course this culling is also regulated according to the weight of the bears, so it can be modified of course from year to year to have as little negative impact on the population as possible.
Slovenian researchers are equipping numerous bears with GPS transmitters. They want to understand the behavior and movement patterns of the bears in order to better avoid conflicts with humans.
Basically, all the GPS collars that we put on animal record the locations as dense as we want, so usually we take it once per hour. So these are these little points here on the map. And then you also get the activity data, which actually helps you to explain what the animal has been doing.
A few of the bears are even equipped with miniature cameras. These images reveal to the researchers why some bears seek the proximity of humans.
For example, in this case, we put a GPS collar on one of the conflict bear in the central part of Slovenia, and then we intensify the sampling, so the location scans once per half an hour, and you can see that basically it used the vicinity of the villages all the time or really often.
Why? There are unprotected garbage containers in the village. Bears are opportunistic, and they learn quickly where they can find something to eat in the villages. Gradually, they lose their fear of humans and provoke dangerous conflicts. That's why the Slovenian Forestry Agency has set up bear-proof waste bins in some villages. Since then, hardly any dangerous encounters with bears have occurred. The project is part of an EU campaign that aims to improve the cohabitation between humans and bears.
In this area, there were larger garbage bins, but they were not protected against bears. There were years when the garbage bins were constantly being dumped on the road by bears. We had to clean them 2 or 3 times a week.
In the back is a heavy load, a piece of concrete, so it's not so difficult to lift it up. It lifts up alone. You put it in, then you close it, lock it.
An important measure to keep bears away from villages and people involves feeding them in the forests. This is also practiced in Romania and Slovakia to reduce conflicts. But it also has negative effects. The animals learn to rely on the easily available food. Feeding makes them lazy. Male bears do not migrate as far anymore. As a result, they often mate with the same partners. The genetic diversity of the animals suffers. In addition, many bears concentrate at feeding sites. Females with cubs then avoid the feeding sites in order not to endanger their young. Male bears are known to kill cubs that are not theirs, so that the females can mate with them. The bear's hibernation patterns are also affected. Studies have shown that the hibernation period is almost halved when the animals find enough food, even in winter. The animals are deprived of their natural behavior.
Artificial feeding is the process of domestication. It's the first step in domesticating a species. So when you feed artificially the bears, then all this role they have in the ecosystem, they are not performing. So they are not dispersing the seeds, they are moving less, sometimes they are not wintering. So you have the species is there, but it's not functionally or not so functionally present as it should be.
But does it even make sense to try to give bears a home in densely populated Europe? Scientists remain optimistic. There are still 380,000 square kilometers of uninhabited land that could provide an appropriate habitat. But from the bear's point of view, Europe is above all a land of barriers. The purple dots are GPS data of a bear in Slovenia. The freeway is red, a rural highway is yellow, and the railroad is the dotted line. All of these structures represent obstacles the bear cannot overcome. Scientists at the University of Leipzig have calculated that a quarter of Europe's total area is within 500 meters of the nearest road. And almost everywhere, the nearest road is at most 9 kilometers away. Vast, extended forests, nowhere to be found. Traffic accidents are a leading cause of death for bears, as footage from a surveillance camera on the freeway between Ljubljana and Trieste illustrates. The Slovenia Forest Service has erected electric fences in particularly critical areas along the freeway in an effort to prevent accidents. But the freeway also prevents the bears from wandering freely, which in turn reduces their propagation.
This stretch of the highway was identified as one of the most important locations where the bears would cross the highway and, of course, cause traffic accidents. Because traffic-related mortality for bears is also quite important cause of mortality and present also a very high risk for humans. Since we installed that about a year ago, we haven't had any traffic accidents with bears, at least in this stretch.
In the long term, the aim is to build green corridors, or game bridges, so the animals can migrate freely. But Europe's freeways, and above all the innumerable streets and roads, can't all be made bear-proof. The most important prerequisite is for people to do their part. This small 2-year-old bear no longer has an instinctive fear of humans. That represents a lethal danger for him and can lead to accidents. The bear explores the vicinity of the street in hopes of finding something to eat. Like here. This human misconduct leads to the so-called problem bears. They learn that being close to humans means food.
When they eat the food offered by motorists, they get used to it and only feed on it. Because the bear is a very opportunistic animal. It takes advantage of all opportunities that present themselves. So he is conditioned to eat here habitually. The bear tolerates and even seeks the presence of humans. It can happen that shortly afterwards he gets hurt by a car or attacks someone. Then he must be removed from here.
This bear is only a few months old and seems to have lost its mother, either to poachers or in a car accident, or due to illegal deforesting that drove her away. The baby bear meets a mother with 3 cubs, a potential danger for him because orphan bears are very rarely adopted by other mothers. Their instinct classifies the foreign bear as a food competitor. Their own offspring have priority. Relaxed and playful, the bear family. But the mother has already scented the orphan bear. The little bear instinctively senses danger. And quickly takes flight. Alone, he has only a small chance at survival. Even if this time the other bear's mother leaves him alone. The danger seems to have been averted, not least because of the bear's talent for climbing. Farther north in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania, in the region of Harghita, is a 20-hectare area that is Europe's only orphanage for baby bears. It was founded by Leonardo Beretsky in 2004. Since then, more than 100 bears have been raised here and subsequently successfully released into the wild. Most of the bears have lost their mothers to car accidents or poachers. Depending on how healthy they are, they may be fed milk from a bottle at first. At the same time, it's important not to let them become too dependent on humans.
In this habitat, they have the possibility to develop the instincts that are inborn and that will ensure their later survival. Those instincts are not learned. behavior types from the mother. It's not needed that they learn things to later survive. The first survival thing they do is to run on trees, because the most important regulating factor of bear populations is the intraspecific predation. Big bears kill small bears. This is a natural phenomenon, and they know it instinctually. They run up immediately as some heavy animal approaches. So these things, observing these things, we figured out that it's possible to rehabilitate bears.
Worldwide, efforts to raise cubs in captivity and then successfully release them into the wild have been rare. Leonardo Boretsky feeds them with the help of drones. That way, he can completely preclude contact between humans and bears, except for the first few days after their arrival. The bears stay here for 2 years in different enclosures until they are big enough to leave the orphanage on their own. Abruzzo National Park in Italy. An unspoiled natural paradise, just a 2-hour drive from Rome. This park is an exceptional example of how humans and bears can live together. Abruzzo is the home of the Marsican brown bear, a subspecies of its own. About 50 to 60 of these animals live here, totally isolated from other populations in Europe. Just under 10,000 people live in the national park, and 2 million tourists visit in the summer. Animal farmers protect their herds using electric fences and guard dogs. The residents also have 100 bear-proof enclosures for their chickens. Paolo Ciucci is leading a large-scale research project on brown bears in Abruzzo. The crucial question for the researcher is how such a small and isolated population can survive in such close proximity with humans.
The problem is that this population has been isolated from other brown bears population in Europe since a long time. We originally thought this time would have been about 400 or 600 years ago, but now with genomic data at hand that we provided, it comes out that this time of isolation might be much, much longer, even possibly more than 4,000 years. So a population of small size isolated for such long time, of course, has some problems in terms of probability of persistence in the long term.
The biologists at the national park faced the challenge of preventing the extinction of the Marsican brown bear. Using hair and scat samples, as well as photo traps, the researchers can determine how large the population is, and how endangered it is, and how it can be effectively protected. To do all this, it is important to know their habitat precisely. And here too, GPS data can help.
This way we can see which habitats they mainly use and where their areas for hibernation are. We can also see if a female is mating or if an animal is causing problems. And in case of death, we can quickly find the carcass and determine the cause of death.
2019 was a successful year. 9 females gave birth to 16 young. However, usually only half of the cubs survive. Male bears, diseases, and accidents are the most common causes of death. In 2017, park biologists freed this bear from a metal sling. Poachers were responsible. The park veterinarian treated the serious injury. But it is not only poachers or car accidents that threaten the bear's survival.
as the number of individuals in a population gets small, the risk of extinction is very, very high. One of the reasons, but not the only one, is that genetically they become very, very homogeneous. They lose a lot of genetic variability, and genetic variability is what animal population needs to survive in an ever-changing environment.
The so-called problem bears that cause damage repeatedly are transferred to the park's small zoo. The average life expectancy of bears in the wild is 6 years. Some live to be 30, like this one. The Abruzzo bear has survived thanks to its amazing propensity for adaptation.
This bear is strictly, remarkably different from other bears of the closest bear population in Europe, because during this long time of isolation from other brown bear population, the Appenheim brown bear in this area, it's remarkably not aggressive toward humans. And we recently found the genetic reason for this, because the genetic material that codifies and somehow shapes aggressive behavior or bold behavior in general toward prey, but also toward humans, are totally absent due to inbreeding and loss of genetic variability. And it is a sort of adaptation of these bears to a country which is strongly inhabited by people.
In Abruzzo, the bears survive because they have adapted to humans and are protected by them. In contrast, in the French Pyrenees, Europe's largest predator faces strong resistance on the part of most animal breeders. In autumn 2019, the French government announced that it will not resettle more bears there for the time being. Are the critics right in saying that predators have no place in Europe?
Our vanity in wanting to be superior to other living creatures through technical and practical mastery of the environment is perhaps an illusion. Are we capable of overcoming this? Can we choose development strategies that allow other living beings to coexist on this planet? Our neighbors, our fellow creatures, if I may say so. If we are willing to accept other species besides our own, perhaps we will finally be something special and more human.
The only hope for the protection of species is in the hands of humans. Those humans who are willing to share their habitat with animals and plants.